supposed to do my intro, I guess. So, welcome to Poor Little Rich Girl, where we delve into the stories that turned this poor little rich girl into a Firebird Rising. Last week, or in the last episode, I gave you a story about how I met Mike and Tony and how they were the first ones to actually inspire me to take our idea of just one car build to something a little bit more spectacular. This week, or this episode, we actually have Mike and Tony here with us. And this is actually a very long awaited interview session because of the story I alluded to the missing 500 cars that turned into some kind of weird Facebook debacle. But before we get into that, we're going to take some time to get to know Mike and Tony, who actually inspired me to take our one little education program and our one little idea and turn it into something that could truly honor what my father's vision was and hopefully change the world for at least a few people, one person at a time. With that, hello, Mike. Hello, Tony. How are you?
Fantastic, and you?
Doing
I'm doing
good.
wonderful.
Good.
So I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch the interview with Angel, but what I like to do is before we get into our story about how we met, I want to introduce both of you to the audience and I want to talk a little bit about what happened to get you guys into the automotive space, what your journeys were, of course, starting if we can with Tony and his story because that's the first one that came to me because what we also want to accomplish here is to tell the journeys of everybody who's now working in the space or was working in the space, how they got there, what different pathways they took. So kids can see and hopefully understand how they might be able to get into this space as well. Does that sound good to you guys?
Sure.
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So now we were trying to figure out the whole camera thing. Let's see if I can figure this out. And then Tony, you're going to be up and we're going to start talking
Uh,
about kind of what your journey was. Okay.
well, my journey as far as working was with Michael. Michael got me in, started in the stamping business, and we had the opportunity to meet your father. And after that, Mike stayed where he was at, and I went on to work various job shops in the prototype industry over the years. Wound up at Bud Company and at Chrysler's over the years. And Mike can tell you more about when we started and how we met your father and so on. Mike? Oh, no. No.
Yep.
There you go.
So I started at a place called Metal Specialists back in 1978. So I was a year out of high
Yeah.
school. I was already working on a lot of cars. Back in the day, we didn't have a lot of money. So if you wanted to go somewhere and your car was broke down, if you didn't fix it, you were walking. So my father-in-law, which would be my father-in-law, didn't know at the time I was dating his daughter, wanted to know if I wanted to come and help, in this prototype business. And I had no idea even what it was. He goes, I see you always working on cars. You help me on my cars. I think you'd be a really good candidate. And I said, okay. I went down there, and walked in and got the job. Started out on the night shift back in 1978 and was sweeping the floor. And not for long. And then back then, they didn't call them apprentices or apprenticeship. That word wasn't even used. The word was helper. So my father-in-law ran a big press. He would be turned out to be my mentor. They didn't use that word either. And so I started working with him. So there was a big 1,200-ton hydraulic press, and he ran it. So each guy had his own press that he ran back then. They didn't switch them around. So he got me in as his helper because his previous helper moved on to another press. So that's where I started learning all about different types of sheet metal, how to form sheet metal, what it took, um, buying all my tools, buying my first big Kennedy toolbox. And he really, he showed me. And the way he showed me was he made me do it as he's standing there and watched. Uh, Back then, you're crawling inside dies that, there's 10, 15, 20, 30,000 pounds above your head, held up by 4 or 5 bolts. Crawl in there and wash off that die and grind these radiuses and do this. And I say, why are we doing this? Because that's what makes it work. You'd always say. And he says, you just pay attention, follow what I tell you, and you will learn it. That was one of the things he always told me. Just pay attention, listen. Stop talking. Pay attention. And so that's how I got started. And I was there for 43 years.
Wow.
Started off sweeping the floor, ended up as plant manager.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Uh-oh. I actually just pulled up some kind of screen. That was fun. That's such a cool story that it started with your father-in-law, but also that the whole journey was just learn here. Here's an opportunity and just pay attention and I'll teach you and you can be successful in life. And that was a lot of how I got to where I was. So I started as an intern in IT and I had this really weird path that ended up as an ethical hacker, or a red teamer, which was my dream job at 18, but I never had official training really. And I really believe in in what you just described, the ability to teach on the job, hands on, and that's such a great way as long as you pay attention. I always tell kids who would come in, you can learn anything. It doesn't matter what your background is, what your skills are. Just show a real passion to learn it and then ask, be respectful, and listen. And anybody will teach you the skills that you want to learn. And you just told this fantastic story of 43 years of your life being built that way. That's so inspiring. So so how
Yeah.
did Tony come into the picture? So you're working, I
Yeah.
assume you were
Well,
working at Metal Specialist if
yeah.
Tony said you brought him in.
It was probably 1980, Tony, I believe. And
Wait, I gotta unmute him.
Okay. Yeah, I came in late in the program, but how Mike was taught, Mike taught me the same way his father-in-law taught him. Get in there and do it. And that's how I learned, and Mike taught me.
So
my
Mike,
father-in-law had retired.
Yes.
wait,
Yeah.
so you had taken over the shop?
So I'd taken over his position on that big
On
hydraulic
that
press
press.
Yeah.
On that
that made
press.
all like the
Yeah.
fenders, quarter panels, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So once you
So
have that press, it's pretty much yours. You
correct.
do everything
Wow.
in it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Both
Wow.
responsible
sides.
for all the jobs running through there. And so of course, I'm going to pick my cousin Tony. And maybe because I just wanted to see him crawl inside the die and get Kurt's head all up his nose and head and everything.
Oh,
So last time I actually let Angel listen to the story that I told before the podcast. You guys didn't get to hear what I said about y'all before we got here. But Mike, one of the things I talked about was how inspiring it was to hear you talk about your time working in the industry, and you talked most about the people who worked with you and you described them as working with you and how you knew their names. You took the time to get to know their names to make sure they were seen. And it was something that really stuck out to me as very different, a type of management style reminiscent of what I heard my father was like. So could you talk a little bit about what it was like when you were running shops and what you did to do things differently?
Yeah, one of the main things I did different. One of the owner's sons
Jay,
was in
right?
charge of Jay Zing was
Yeah.
in charge of the other plant. We had two plants. They were, just, 5, 6 blocks apart. And we got to be good friends, And I used to watch him do his meetings. I would go down there and watch his meetings. And what really stuck out to me, and then he explained it to me later, was before he would go to a meeting, let's say he had a department meeting or maybe a shop meeting, you figure at that time there was probably only about 150, 120 people in that shop, both shifts. So he said, what you do, he says, you go in their files, you pick 2 or 3 or 4 people, and you memorize their kids' names and their wife's names. And he said, when you're standing up there talk about the state of the business, and what your plans are, and how you have the open door policy, that you're walking on the floor, and you're more than welcome to come up to me and ask me a question if you want. And he said, when you're having your meeting, you look right at this person, let's just say it's John, and you say, hey, John, how do you think things are going here? And John might say something. Usually they were pretty shy. And I would say, well, how is Patty and Mary? I mean, this job is providing you the means to support your family and your wife, Lisa. And I'm sure they're very proud of you that you're learning, and you're on the path to making very good money in this industry, and the door is wide open for you. So I would do that to 2 or 3 people during my meeting, and they used to see some of the looks on their faces when I knew what their kids' names were and their wife's names were. They had no idea. They were kind of like dumbfounded, actually. But it really sunk into them. I mean, you can talk to somebody, you can talk at somebody, but if you do not make the connection with the person on that level where they trust you, where they believe what you're saying, then it won't happen. So
Yeah.
that's one of the most important things, in my opinion.
And sometimes it takes something just as simple as taking a few minutes and of course it's very difficult. It'd be nice to memorize all of their kids' names and all of their
Yeah.
family, but taking the time to recognize those few, the impact it has on that open door policy you were trying to facilitate is much bigger than just those 3 people, because everybody sees that you're seeing them as humans. It also helps to kind of level the playing field. There's always this mysticism around executives, and I would always try and remind the interns, they were once where you were pretty much. They weren't always big scary bosses. They're
Nope.
people. You can talk to them, and just being able to break down those barriers and facilitate the communication. That's how you're gonna My father always said that's how you're gonna find out what's wrong on the line, is the people who are doing it. And if they're too
Yeah.
scared to tell you, then you're gonna get soap on a gas pedal without telling anybody. Or are we not talking about the Cybertruck incident? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys not hear about that?
No, not at all.
Oh, goodness. So it made me think of both of you you right away. So the Cybertruck was having an incident recently where the gas pedal was getting stuck, which isn't funny. That's actually a very tragic issue. There was a problem on the line, and somebody added soap to the lubricant, which caused the top piece of the pedal to get stuck and slide forward and stick the gas pedal down. And I was like, "Oh, problem on the line. Nobody mentioned." Okay, sounds familiar. um, but that's what
Yeah.
happens when you're too afraid to speak up about what's wrong. And I think what you were doing, Mike, was huge towards even just quality control, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, and even like right now, my job that I have right now, well, I have a couple jobs, but the job that I have right now is crisis management.
Mhm.
I go into plants. I was just in Alabama working on Mercedes issues. And the first thing you got to do is you got to get the people on the line especially when you walk in, they say, "Oh man, here comes this boss is going to chew us out and this and that," and the first thing, they don't like you, you know,
Hmm.
and you have a meeting with them. You say, "I'm not here to take your job. I'm not here for you to lose your job. I'm here to help you figure out how we can make your job easier, your day more exciting and fun and learning and doing the job the right way. Maybe by changing lines on the floor, maybe by changing where the parts are located, maybe by, there's just a million different things that you go through with all these people.
Hmm.
And once they see that you got a vested interest in them, and I tell them, I says, you don't want Mercedes turning back parts, so you want to make a quality part. So we make a quality part, we keep the job, which
Hmm.
keeps everybody in this place working,
Yeah.
and you're able to support your family and all that. So you really got to form that connection with the people, no matter where you are. You can be in Alabama, you can be in Michigan, you can be anywhere. Any line that I've ever worked on or worked with, the connection of talking and being nice to people, recognizing them as a person,
Hmm.
that they have a life other than working all the time. It's a great thing. It's a great thing to see when it changes, when it finally
Yeah.
sinks in. There's still a few, that don't rise, but you'll see, out of a line of 20 people, you'll see, 15 of them just rise to the top.
Yeah.
Like it just
Because they
changes.
feel
It goes like when I
because
first
they feel
started, they were making
empowered.
30 parts an hour. Yes. Yes, they do. I says, it's up to you. You can make 30 parts an hour. You can make 60 parts an hour. What do you want to do? We want to make 60 parts an hour. You tell me, is there something on the line that we can change? Anything. You tell me. I'm all ears. And a lot of times when they told me things, I would say
They
90% were correct.
Mhm.
they know all the bottlenecks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would change it. Yeah. And I would change it. I would say, okay, we're taking Jim's idea and we're implementing it tomorrow. And they get big smiles on their faces, and it's great. And you recognize them because you always have like a meeting before the shift starts, and you recognize them people. I like to say, Adeline did a great job yesterday. We implemented a suggestion that she had why these screws kept popping out, and she figured it out. We brought it to the team, implemented it, problem solved. So it's
It's
great.
amazing. It's amazing how much more you can get done when you trust in your team and you empower them like that. That's something that, I've heard, again, stories that my father would do this, and it was one of the things that set him aside, and he always told me allowed him to get quality. I would joke he was the first undercover boss because he always told me stories of putting on the coveralls and going and working the line and finding out what was wrong. But I had the privilege in my life of working for somebody like that, and I can tell you that, I bet you see this in the people you've worked with as well. Every single person who worked for this particular manager, because he put us first, and he cut the costs he needed to cut by efficiencies, like you said, and by trusting in us to tell him what was wrong. And every single one of us, if he called any one of us that worked from him, from his direct reports all the way down to the level one people who answered the phones, all of us would drop what we're doing and go work for him in a second, because of the experience we had of feeling like we were part of something meaningful. And it didn't matter where you were on that totem pole. He made you feel like, the person sweeping the floor eventually is going to be the person, running things. So treat them with respect, right?
Yeah, man,
Always.
it's definitely true. It happened to me in my life. I
Yeah.
remember meeting your dad the first time. I
What
was
was
I
that
was
like?
in kind of shocking actually. I was in the press. We were making the inner doors for the DeLorean, and back then the dies were pretty primitive. Okay, they were made out of quartzite, and of Of course, it's stainless steel. And we had to use what we called rubber. So you would take where a wrinkle would form on the top of a part, you take this piece of rubber and you'd have maybe 3 inches of rubber, and they'd be set in like in 1 inch sections. So you would, bring the part down in the press real slow, you bring it down an inch, pull that one piece of rubber out, hammer, and Tony can contest to this, what a number 3 rawhide hammer is,
All day
and
long.
hammer these stainless steel, which wasn't very easy. Hammer these wrinkles down, then you put the rubber back in, bring it down another inch, hammer it again. Okay, bring it down another inch, take the last piece of rubber out, hammer it all down. Sometimes use a corking block, get it all nice and neat before you bring it home. And we were hitting them at 1,000 tons actually,
Wow.
because it took a lot of
What's
pressure.
so let's go back a little bit because you guys were pretty much the first to try and figure out how to stamp body panels in stainless like this, right?
Yeah.
Had anybody done it
Well,
before?
at least in
Yeah.
the modern era, with the shapes like
Yeah,
we had, the inner
like
door
this one.
was tremendously hard, and so I'm sitting there hammering, and I'm getting ready to swing the hammer, and somebody taps me on my shoulder, and I turn around, I look, and Fred Homan, the owner, which I think worked with your dad at one time at GM, said, "Mike, I'd like you to meet John." John put out his hand. "Mike, how you doing?" He goes, "I'd really like to know what you're doing." I said, and we had like a little step stool where you could stand on and look inside. I said, "Come on up here and we'll show you." So he went up there and looked, and I showed him where the rubber goes and what we had to do to make this part. And he goes, "That's pretty ingenious." I says, "Well, this is the first time we're working with stainless steel, so we had to come up with some pretty far out ideas that nobody's ever tried, And he says, "Good, very good job." And then he kind of stepped back and watched art, and that was how I first met him. I think I met him 4 times. He was out on the floor.
Wow.
So it was
Wow.
very, very like, wow,
You never
And he
forget
looked,
it. You never forget
I
it.
don't know how to explain how he looked. Would dapper be the wrong
Yes. No, dapper
term
is
to
correct.
use?
Dapper
Okay.
is very he has such a unique style to him that
Yes.
I think the only way to describe him was
So
dapper.
cool to me at the
Yeah,
time.
very cool. Very cool. Um, wow, that was a
Yeah.
really cool story. Before we go, because Tony, I am gonna put you on the spot because you were the
Yeah,
one
shoot.
who like
Shoot.
but before we get into Tony's story, could you tell me some of the unique challenges you faced having to learn how to stamp in stainless for the first time? What was it like having to work with this whole new material like this?
Well, the stainless
It's
steel,
not new
we
material, no,
used
but
it. So,
yeah, we used it before.
Really?
no,
It's
The
you
gas
it was the
tanks.
first time
Gas
we were
tanks.
using
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no, but we used to make gas tanks out of stainless steel too. We
So
Yeah.
did that
so
there.
that So it was just the
That
first
was
time
easy
it's
stuff.
being used on something
For
like
body
body panel.
panels
Yeah.
for us,
Yeah,
right?
the body
Uh,
panels, correct. And
So so how was
you got to remember it was brushed stainless steel.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so on top of the brush was a blue plastic. Okay, so when we ran the stampings in the dies, besides having to always polish the radiuses because some of the plastic would come off and all that, um, we used a lot of back in the day STP. I don't know if you remember what that was. It was an oil treatment, looked like
oil
Yeah.
honey,
additive, engine
Yeah.
oil additive. Yeah.
and something called Super Draw, which was just more of the same. And so you had to be, but you didn't scratch that brushed finish.
Yeah.
So that was one of the most unique and I think hardest things to overcome because the radius had to be so polished. You got to remember, we were using Kurtzite. We didn't have steel dies at the time that you could chrome, or I don't even know if they did that back then. But uh, so we had after so many parts, you had to go in there, clean the whole die out, polish the radiuses with a big polishing wheel, and start over again.
So
And
you how
I know for a fact that the quantity was 500.
Okay, I was gonna ask that question. I was just gonna ask
I
that
thought you
question.
were.
How
I
many?
thought you were.
Okay, so we'll get back to how that turned into like this incredible debacle that resulted in multiple people having to be blocked on my Facebook account in a moment. Before we get into the missing 500 car debacle, Lord forbid I try and have fun with some DeLorean owners for once. Tony,
Yes.
I really told everybody, we're going to put you right here. I told everybody what it was like the first time we met and how
Hmm.
you told me the story of being a helper,
Yeah.
an
Uh,
apprentice, and
yes.
how this was a unique opportunity for you. And so I've been really geeked for everybody to meet my muse, because that's what I said, Tony's my
Ah,
muse. Because it was truly when you told me your story that I said, "Oh, wow, let's make this something bigger." And you were really just a huge inspiration in that aspect. And I would love if you would talk about what it was like being able to work on such a cool project essentially right out of high school, right? So or just one of your first jobs?
yeah. No, it wasn't my first job. No,
No?
I had quite a few jobs, and I always worked two or three jobs at a time.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, it was awesome, right? Once you got in there, you started forming metal, right? They didn't care what kind of metal it was, right? We formed it. We were making satellite dishes to gas tanks to work for John Deere and Winnebago. you know,
Really?
yeah, we did it
Wow.
all there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Uh,
how soon after you start was did the DeLorean project come in? Were you working there for a while? Was it one of the first things you got to work
uh,
on?
no, actually, the first thing I got to work on was a GM inner door. I'll never forget it.
Really?
Yes, yeah,
Really? Oh,
yeah,
can you
inner
tell us
door.
that story? What was it?
Uh, Inner door. We didn't know what it was for.
Really?
They just said we knew it was for GM. Yeah, we had stuff come in for GM truck and bus. It was either a floor pan or uh,
Yeah, I think it was a
whatever it was.
blazer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
might have been. But I remember it was an inner door. I'll never forget it because Mike and I, like I said, were hammering all day. An inner door, you probably drawn down what 4 or 5 inches deep. Lots of
Wow.
wrinkles, lots of buckles. We try not to get splits or double metal, you know, and
So
that's what we did all day.
so back
You
then
know?
there is there as much hand hammering now as there was back then? You have more
Uh,
machines now to do that,
more
right?
machines now to do it. Yes, more development in the dies today. Mike could better answer that. I went in from die development to dies that were already developed and run high volume production.
Wow.
So that's my background.
What
You
was
know,
that like for you to move into the high volume production?
it's a different ball game.
Yeah?
Yeah, yes, yeah, yeah,
So you
different
got
ball
to
game.
work on the lines that actually make the cars that end up so on the road. I mean,
Yes,
you got to work on parts that ended up on cars on the road too, Mike,
yes,
but the
yes,
high
Yeah.
production lines would be something more like you would think of where you have the full line, the car actually rolling off the line, right?
yes,
As opposed to a parts supplier or a prototype house.
right.
Yeah.
Mike did a lot where Mike was working. They did a lot of low volume production, but it was
Yeah.
still production and still wound up on vehicles.
Yes,
You
yes.
know,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know,
Well, those are the kinds of actually the kinds of shops that we're now partnering with you guys so that we can actually work with these. And it's interesting because I don't think a lot of people understand how many different places that the parts on their vehicle come from. They don't just come from sources in China or the actual OEM's main plants. They come from lots of different small manufacturing plants that can do everything from prototyping body panels to producing OEM parts that go on cars. And I don't think that a lot of people today really think about how much of our manufacturing infrastructure is still here and how many different opportunities we have. I make the joke that we're a generation of makers now, and I don't think really anybody thinks about the fact that you can get paid to do this. Did you understand that?
Yeah.
And so I love talking to you guys about what it's like for you. And you but I loved hearing the stories about when you were able to come up with ideas and fix things on the line. But so let's go a little bit into what it was like when we first met, Tony, because you just kind of were like, "Hi, I
I
worked on
couldn't
your
shut
dad's
up,
car."
right?
It was just a wonderful
Uh,
it was really truly exceptional, and I think I called you 1,000 times,
we
every
talked for
day.
like
Yeah.
3 months around the clock.
Yes, yes.
You'd call me at midnight, or we talk at 4 in the morning, right? Or whatever it was. It was all good, right? I was having a ball. For me,
I
it was like, working with Mike all these years, and here we go again, right?
Yeah.
John DeLorean's daughter, the great John DeLorean, right? And now I'm working with the great John DeLorean's daughter. Oh my God, right? I'm blown away.
Oh,
But this
well,
is nice.
I'm so blessed that you both found me because you both have such a wonderful and incredible storied history in this industry. And it started with both of you saying just a little nudge here and there. We can do this.
We can do this.
We know
We
some
got
people.
this.
Yeah, we can
I'm
hook
ready.
up. Yeah, let's go. But but I think what also people don't understand is you literally have been here since day 1, Tony, and
Yes.
and when I try and tell people that I didn't set out to make a car, they never believe me. But you've been here since day 1, and this
Yes.
was not
Yes.
about a car. This was a whole different experience that we started with
Mhm.
from a different perspective than me, and we'll get your take on this too, Mike. What's it been like to watch how this turned into our one-off build into what it's becoming today, and to know that pretty soon we're going to start changing the lives of kids everywhere? What's it like for you?
Well, for me, it just reminds me of the older days.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I mean, that's what we did. We took these kids. I mean, some of them didn't even know what a screwdriver or a hammer was, and a lot of kids nowadays, if they're not on their iPad or iPhone, they don't work on cars anymore. A lot of them don't even want to drive anymore, and we got to get them interested in it. I mean, it's there for their taking. I think once they understand how much fun it is and how it really stimulates you to be able to do things that nobody else can do and talk about things that nobody else knows. Me and Tony are probably,
We
the
talk
dinosaur
flushing
here,
gaps every day.
you
Yes,
know.
right. Panel
Fit
gaps,
to
like,
finish. Fit to finish. That's all we talk about, right?
no,
My wife
and
got a new car, and she said that she didn't want me looking at it because
and
all I would do is complain about how the gaps weren't right. She said, "Don't touch
uh,
it and don't look at it."
don't do a QA assessment of
uh,
my car. But it's
exactly.
also it's also really cool to be part of something meaningful, and I think that's something that, when we first met, Mike, you said, because quiet quitting was all over the place, and you said,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me how I stopped quiet quitting, and I said, that's easy, give them something meaningful to do. And you were like, oh, gee, that makes sense. But that's exactly what y'all are doing. It's, imagine being somebody who gets to make the Corvette, right? And well, for me, for you guys, you got to be part of real cars on the road. And every time you see it go by, you're like, I did that. That one right there. That's me. That one too.
Oh,
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
it runs through your mind all the time.
Oh,
it's,
that's so
we made
cool.
a lot of cars. I made all the GT40s for Ford, all the body panels,
Wow. Whoa.
every
I
every,
just
every
met the
one.
guy who designed it. like when we were in Detroit. Wow. Wow, how
Yep,
cool.
yep.
Oh, wow.
MSI made all the body panels. We also did the Viper. We
Oh,
did the
no,
sills, where
no.
the exhaust comes out, and the
Why is
doors.
the Viper? Miles, the
All the
Viper
generation,
is
all the
haunting me.
generation.
Oh, we'll talk
Yeah.
about my love-hate relationship with the Dodge Vipers someday. I can't get
Well,
away
if
from
you
this
Uh,
car.
if you seen how it was made, Tony was there. It was
Oh,
handmade. It looked like the frame was made in somebody's garage with a MIG welder. It
no,
was
it's
tubes.
no, I don't. So I love everybody who worked on the Viper. I love all the idea behind it. I love that they wanted to base it off of. I hate that it was based off of, but love that they wanted to base it off of the Shelby Cobra. But for me, it missed all the marks. I at the time that the Viper came
Right.
out, father had the NSX, and I would always say, if I can keep up with you on the track in my inline six and you have a V10, anybody can make a V10 go fast. It can't go around the track. Make it handle. Also, I really feel like it's a Mitsubishi and not an American made sports car. So what is happening here? But those are all very personal feelings about a car that was really iconic for a lot of reasons, and a lot of people love the car. I just at the time felt like the engineering that had gone into one of the most legendary cars of all time, that Acura NSX of the 90s, if it could keep up with a V10, there's something wrong in this scenario. That was my
Yeah, it
feeling.
was, especially the first ones that came out, because I drove them all, and the first ones were like, it was almost like a go kart. It ran so rough, it just, you couldn't turn corners fast. All you could do is go straight, and really it didn't go straight because the back end would go all over the place, and
Okay.
it was
Okay.
it was
Oh
something.
gosh, I got a cough. Oh goodness.
all right, good.
Sorry. No, I love me some Dodge, but also yes, it can only go, if it can only go in a straight line, it can only go in a straight line. But I'm not here to dodge to beg to, rag on Dodge. No problems here with it's no GTO, that's all I'll say. Which can really go pretty well in a straight line. So wow, that was actually a lot of fun. That was the most fun I've had talking about a Viper in a while. So
Well,
let's go, Tony.
parts we made were good.
Yeah, okay. Tony.
Yeah.
So it's your turn. For you, what has this been like? This has been a really long journey. We have shifted all different kinds of ways. So, like, what for you, what does it mean for you, what you see that we're going to be able to do for this next generation?
Anything they want to know, we'll tell them. I'm
Ha!
sure they will all be blown away. But it's been totally awesome working with you and working with the kids and working with the suppliers and everybody. It's been great,
Was it?
getting things done every day, Uh, we all wear the same hat. We're all in doing whatever we can, right? So
Yes.
it's been fabulous, you
Oh,
know.
yes, everybody should know that our wonderful new merch, Tony helped us with by setting us up with our new merch supplier. Thank you, Tony.
Yay.
Beautiful. I should have a
Yeah.
sweatshirt on, but I don't. I have my Detroit sweatshirt, my t-shirt, represent. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah. So,
uh, but it's been fabulous, right?
yeah,
Working with you and Jason and everybody. It's just been great. It's been mind blowing for me too, right? Could you imagine me working with Mike and your father now working with you over 40 years later, right? Think about that.
yeah, because we're
How do
here.
I
That's
feel? How do I feel?
I don't
Right?
know. It's kind of
It,
amazing for me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So before we wrap this all up, let's talk about this 500 carb mess that
Oh,
happened. So
shoot.
I'll switch over to me and I'll introduce this whole debacle to everybody who wasn't involved. So, having a little water. I met Mike and Tony, and we were talking for some time, just hanging out, talking about what we were doing, and they kept talking about the first 500 cars for a while. I think it was about a year before I started to put 2 and 10 together, maybe. Eventually, I found out that the VINs for the DMC actually start at 500, and I put 1 and 2 together. Nobody had any real story as to why the VIN started at 500. There was a bunch of rumors about maybe they were ghost cars in Ireland, all kinds of different theories about what these first 500 VINs would be. And my hypothesis was if Mike and Tony had stamped 500 cars in Detroit, maybe it was an homage to the 500 cars in Detroit. And so, I made the mistake of thinking Facebook was like it was when I left in 2017 or something, and that people still had civility or something. Do not make that mistake yourself. It is a cesspool of hate and anger or something. Allegedly, maybe, I don't know. But in reality, I said this. I said, "Hey, maybe this is why." And I was immediately attacked by a mass of DeLorean owners, one who said, "If there were 500 cars stamped in Detroit, it's the greatest mystery since the faked moon landing." And this started an entire, situation in which I reminded people that it was my social media, and I have always, since before I left, demanded respect of all people, myself and anybody else who comments on my page, and if you do not speak like a decent human being to everyone, including saying, "I don't believe that there are 500 cars that were stamped in Detroit. Could you please elaborate?" versus "It's the greatest whatever," he said. Just be polite. So I warned these people, but it delved into utter chaos. And then all of a sudden, there was this massive hatred towards me for daring to suggest that the 500 cars stamped in Detroit might have something to do with the VIN starting at 500. And then I actually did have some fun by saying, "Hey, what happened to these 500 panels for cars stamped in Detroit?" Which was summarized to 500 cars. And then all of a sudden, I was talking about 500 cars buried in a field somewhere in New Jersey. And oh boy, did it turn into something wild and crazy, and I was the world's biggest conspiracy theorist, when in fact, I always said, "I have no idea what happened. Let's go on a journey together." So, I'm gonna turn this back over to you, Mike, and let's hypothesize, where do we think these panels went? Because you said, "I'm pretty sure I loaded them on a truck." Bill says, "No, only 4 made it to Visionaring," and then that's where we lost the rest of the panels. What happened to the rest of the hundreds of panels? Where maybe they were melted down, we couldn't find them on any early cars. I thought maybe they ended up somewhere. Do you have any idea what might have happened?
Well, um, the only thing I can think of is when we were making panels, and to say we only made 4 is totally wrong because we were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for like 2, 3 months, wasn't it, Tony?
Yeah, at least.
So I was watching them. Our plaster department, we used to call it back then, they also made the boxes that the parts went in. So I would see them loading, like doors and fenders in these boxes. They would just make, slits so they would all fit in.
And I think it was right across from us where we were working. We could see it all day long, right?
So
yes,
I think there was like 15 fenders in a box, and I think 6 doors. But they were building boxes after boxes every day,
Wow.
and so to say that there, I mean, maybe there was 400 and something. I don't know, but there were. I know when I asked what the order was for, I was told 500, and that was by Fred Holman, the owner of the company.
Wow. I wonder if
So
we can find somebody who actually knows where these we did find panel number 1, Tony. Remember when we were at Sketch Battle, the guy, I
yes,
think it was at
yes,
Sketch Battle, the
yes,
guy came up and
yes.
showed you the picture. Did you
That
ever
was a
get to see
script.
did
That
you
was a
get to see
script.
it?
Yes, I showed it to Mike. It was a scrap panel. It had a
Oh,
split in it.
how
Right. Yeah.
cool. Oh,
Yeah.
so we found
Yeah.
one. We
Yes.
found one.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yes.
499 to
Yeah.
go.
It was a draw shell. It wasn't even a finished
Wow.
panel. It was just a draw shell. That's all it was.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. What did he do
They're
with it? Because I know he
they're there
offered it to us.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the
Somebody's got them.
boxes that they made were heavy duty. They were
Yeah.
made to maybe go overseas.
Wow. Maybe they
Uh,
ended up in Ireland after all. Who knows? I did try
That's
and we were looking to try and see if we could find any evidence of these because we talked about all of the different identifiers that you might be able to find, the hand tooling marks and things like that that would make them stand out from others. But yet, as of yet, we haven't found these missing 500 cars that we should probably stop talking about because now the whole mob is going to come back after me with their pitchforks for even bringing it
uh,
bringing it up.
when was the first one off the line in Ireland?
Oh, I
81,
found that.
82?
I think it was 81. I found the newspaper.
81.
It said the first 10 cars rolled off the line on County Antrim, which is so cool.
So if we were working on them in 80,
Yeah.
maybe started at the end of 79, how did they build all that steel tooling and get a car off the line in less than 2 years?
Oh, the whole belief that the company actually started, as far as I can tell, in 1972 before my dad even left General Motors, which is crazy, according to employee number 2, who was given some secret office down the road from where my dad was and bought his own printing studio. That was wild. But yeah, no, the whole thing actually started when he was working with Allstate, and Allstate wanted him to design the safety car, and he got this whole idea in his head. And as it turned out, what he really wanted to do is what we're doing today. The point wasn't the car, it was the factory in the troubles. And so the fact that I learned that we're doing exactly what he's doing, and then the whole factory tour, which I talked about last time when we toured it in October, a day later than he had it in his plans, and I freaked out on y'all because we I don't know if you remember that, but that was quite the wild adventure we went on. So this was a lot of fun, both of you. I thank you so much. Do you guys have anything else you want to say before we go that you want to say to the next generation, to everybody out there who's listening to the story about my dad and the car?
Well, I'd like to say I can't wait to meet some of these new students that I've never met before and be able to really explain to them and connect with them on a level that their future is bright, and we'll be able to teach you, and it's going to be something you're going to love, and it'll stick with you all your life. And tell them things that they would never know, because the stuff that me and Tony did back in
no longer done.
1980,
Yeah.
none of
No longer done.
that's around anymore. And
Yeah, but still very
probably
valuable knowledge.
Very valuable. Yes.
me and Tony are
Yeah.
probably one of the last few that
Hey.
can even say a story like that.
Hold on, Tony. Let's tell him about building a Damascus car, huh? Yeah,
Absolutely. Let's
right.
get it going. That's right.
So-
all day long.
Right, because
Yep.
the old school guys, they know how to do stuff like that. So, right. So if anybody wants to sponsor, here, wait, no, I'm gonna put.
Give
me
us
on
some
big-
material. We'll
Yeah.
make it into a part, and we'll make you a car.
If anybody wants to sponsor making a Damascus skin, let's go. We'll do it. Come on.
That's right. Yeah. There you
Well,
go.
thank you guys so much. Thank you first so much for finding me, because you two really were a big catalyst for why we went into the next level. Thank you for just the joy you bring into my life, the support that you guys have given. You two have been super integral to every step of our success, connecting us with people at every level and really showing us how it's done, explaining to us how it's done. And the expertise you've brought to our team is beyond invaluable. So I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you so
Uh,
much.
well, thank you for having us, right?
Yep, I
Uh,
Yeah.
appreciate you
yeah,
too
yeah, yeah. Thank
very
So,
you.
much.
Yeah.
everybody, thank you very much for joining us. Next week, continue into the story that these two have also followed along with me with, where I found out about my entire estate being stolen by some woman who never even married my dad, and some really crazy story about other stuff. My dad's story is kind of wild, and I just learned it all in the past 2 years. Join me as I tell you what that was like. Until next time, see you later. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Our next episode, we're trying to set up the meeting with TPT so we can meet with one of their engineers and talk to them about what it's
Hey.
like trying to find engineers here in the States and why it's a challenge and what they have available in the projects that they do and how they sponsor their engineers continuing education over time. So hopefully we'll get to set up a meeting with them. And after that, we'll continue